Hi, my name is Satnam Panglia. Welcome to my podcast. Hi, Marion.
Hi, Satnam.
Hi, so we have Marion Parrish on the podcast today, the Accidental Manager Coach. Sounds like a bit of a confusing title. Marion, tell us a little bit about yourself and what does this Accidental Manager Coach mean?
So, hi. I'm Marion. I'm a mum. I live in Derbyshire, and I have worked in HR and training roles, working with managers for the last 28 years now. And what I've discovered over those sort of 28 years is that most managers in the UK never actually planned to become managers. They were accidental managers, if you like. They just happened to be really good at their day job or really good at growing their business and got to a point where they needed other people to help them, or they were put in charge of a team. And that's where the accidental manager bit comes from. Because they've probably spent their whole career learning how to do the thing they're really good at. And suddenly they've become a manager and they've got to learn all the HR things as well. And that's where I come in, because I do have a really solid background in HR. And I can help them learn how to get the best from people.
Brilliant. So you do management as well as teaching them new skills like HR?
So they do the managing.
Yeah.
Because obviously they are the managers. They've got the contract with their employees. They've got the relationship. But I teach them how to manage better. So, sometimes it's around the way we talk to people. Sometimes it's around things like, are you really clear on your expectations? Have you really communicated that clearly to the people that are working for you? Do they really understand what you're looking for? Or are you making assumptions about that? So I do a lot of work with managers on improving their management approach, but I also support them with the HR stuff that they need to manage their business effectively.
Okay, I see management really as a communication skill. Really, I've seen good managers and bad managers, and I think the difference between a good manager and bad manager tends to be more about how they communicate with their staff, getting their message across, or getting their staff to do things that they require, but in a fairly orderly manner, rather than being shouted at or being bullied into doing things like that. Would you say that's true?
I definitely think communication is the number one skill managers need. I think the other thing that makes a really good manager great is empathy. It's that ability to put themselves in their employees' shoes and to understand that each person in their team is different and needs a different approach from their manager. Some of them need motivating and encouraging. Some of them need telling, and understanding at different points in people's sort of development what style is best for them really is what shows a brilliant manager from a not quite as good manager.
I think you're absolutely right. And with management, I think there's so many skills they have to have. Do you have a team of people that can teach them different skills or point them in the right direction? If you see a manager comes to you and says, this is the situation, and you realize actually the manager needs to be upskilled, is that something that you would do? Or
yeah, that's something I do myself. So I think I'm reasonably rare amongst HR professionals, because I actually have a program of coaching, one-to-one coaching for managers, where we actually work on the particular problems you've got in your team and in your business and help you as a manager. And I'll hold your hand, teach you, support you while you learn the things you need to do, and then put them in place and really embed them as a manager. So it gives you the confidence to know you're doing the right things.
I think you're right. I think I see a lot of managers, and if you just go on a course, and I think you're done. But I think what you're saying really is it's not an overnight thing. That you need to be coached, mentored into developing into a better manager. I think that's what I was trying to get at. Really, is that something that you do? And obviously, I think one of your titles there is one-to-one coaching. I personally have coaching in my business and in various other things I do, and I truly believe that to become better, you need to find somebody who can help you get there. Because even though you have a book or a video or something you can read about it, etc. But I think you need somebody else who's been there, done it, to hold your hand, as they said.
I absolutely agree. I think, I spent about 10 years of my career training managers, so doing sort of traditional classroom teaching. And the thing that comes across, when you teach people in a classroom, you're teaching them what to do, but you can't teach them about every single different situation they might encounter in their career. So you might know the theory of how to deal with, say, an absent employee, but when the employee sat in front of you crying and telling you this terrible sort of story about all the awful things that are happening in their personal life, there isn't a training course on the planet that prepares you for that. So having somebody like me that you can kind of talk to and say, well, how do I handle this? What do I do? I'm getting sucked into this, and I need to sort of learn how to step back and be professional. And that's the bit I can help them to do, is to actually step back and look at the whole picture and understand whether this is a situation that's appropriate for formal absence management, or whether it needs to be a counselling situation or something very different. So just being able to adapt your style to different individuals and different situations is such a massive part of the job. And it's something that's useful to get feedback on from time to time as to whether you chose the right style or the right approach in a particular situation, or whether that's led you into an even more difficult scenario that you weren't anticipating.
I think if there was ever a time where we need help and coaching as a manager, I think probably now is about the time, because at the moment people are coming back to work. They are on furlough, and there is all sorts of things going on in the background, i.e. the pandemic. There are people stressed. The managers are stressed. The whole workforce is stressed about not just about their job, but about keeping their job, returning to work. So it doesn't matter which way you look at it, whether they're stressed about staying at home, coming to work, having an income, or being made redundant, or staying on furlough. There's a whole host of things going on at the moment. I think right now, if anybody needs their hand-holding, is about now, because nobody's really equipped or ready, and you just need a sounding board or somebody to talk to and say, look, this is a situation at work. I've got all these employees. What do I do? So we have a number of people listening on the podcast, and they are employees, they are managers, and they are also business owners. So we've got a whole host of people, and to address this, first thing I really want to talk about is an ever-changing thing. The furlough scheme is changed again. So we're now looking at, we've gone from furlough to part-time furlough. So can you tell us a bit about furlough and what's happening right now?
Yeah, so the original furlough scheme was introduced on the 20th of March, and you were either, under that scheme, you were either furloughed and you could not work at all, or you were not furloughed and you worked your normal contractual hours. And that's been in place, as I say, since March. Now, from the 1st of July, that scheme is going to change. So instead of being completely in or completely out, you can still be completely furloughed and completely not furloughed, but you also now have an option of part-time furlough. So for employers, it's a time to start thinking about whether your business, it would be best if you brought people back just to work a few of their contractual hours rather than having to pay their full-time salary. Maybe you've got enough work for them to do 1 shift a week rather than 5 shifts a week. So what you'll be able to do from the 1st of July onwards is bring them back to work that 1 shift and pay them their normal contractual pay for that 1 shift. And then for the other 4 shifts that week, they can be furloughed. So you can then claim back from the government 80% of their pay for those 4 days, up to a maximum of £2,500. So it gives employers the ability to kind of gradually scale up their workforce to meet demand if it's going to sort of increase slowly over time, rather than have to bring everybody back or make everybody redundant, which is the other choice a lot of business owners are facing.
I think one of the thoughts I had was that if I don't want to bring any of my staff back or some of the staff back, could I just get some external contractors in temporarily and just keep all my staff on furlough. Say if they are in the shielding group or whatever, and I still need people, could I just keep them on furlough and get some contractors in?
Okay, so we need to be really careful here and really clear about what is and isn't allowed under the scheme.
Yeah.
So if you have work for people to do, then you're not entitled to claim money from the government under the furlough scheme, except for a small number of circumstances. For example, if you've got someone who's shielding, potentially if you've got parents who have got no childcare arrangements, you can potentially continue to furlough them and use external support to cover until they're able to return to the workplace. What you can't do is furlough your entire workforce and then bring in a whole load of contractors to do the work for perhaps less money or whatever. So you can't, the HMRC are going to be auditing furlough claims in the future. They've given themselves 5 years to come and audit claims. So they will be coming back and checking, what work did you have available? How can you prove what work you had available? Where did these external people come from? Why have you brought them in? I think if you can say that this external person is covering this parent who had no childcare until September, that will be a very different argument to we just left everybody on furlough, let you pay for them, and brought in a load of people on a much lower rate of pay just to make ourselves a bit of profit. That is definitely going to be unlawful. That's fraud, essentially.
Right, that's very interesting because we hear things, and that is one of the questions that people have been asking, and I think that's really useful because I've just learned something new there. So you're an employer, you've got all this staff on furlough. Who do you bring back? I mean, how do you decide?
Well, I think you need to look at your business and what you expect the demand to be in your business. So there might be particular services that you think, or that you're able to open earlier, or that you think, there's likely to be pent up demand for those. So it would make sense to bring back the people who are able to deliver that particular service. I would generally say look for people who are multi-skilled, so they can perhaps do 3 or 4 different roles within the business, because they will give you more flexibility in the early stages, because they'll be able to cover lots and lots of different things. A lot of employers are finding that demand is patchy. They can be very busy one day, it can be then go very quiet, and then other parts of the business that get busier. So having people who can mix and match and move around is going to be quite important. But you also need to think about people's personal circumstances as well. So, who are the people who really are going to struggle to get back to work, perhaps because they've got children at home, perhaps they are unwell, and think about whether you can leave them till the end. So make them perhaps some of the last people that you bring back to work, and then bring back others who are immediately available to work and able to sort of come and do the hours that you need them to do when you need them to do them.
I think you mentioned there about children. My cleaner, for example, normally comes round to our house every week, but due to everything has not been coming round. Now, because her children are not going back to school, she's not able to come round at all because she just can't get the childcare, nobody to look after the kids. If you've got staff and they've got kids and they can't get childcare, can you force them back to work, or what do you do with those those people? Because obviously it's difficult for them to do that.
So this is unprecedented in the UK. We've never had a situation like this where schools are closed, nurseries are closed, grandparents aren't able to look after children because if they don't live in the same household. So actually for parents, they have no childcare options in a lot of cases. So we have to kind of look at normal employment law and then say, yes, but, and we're in these unprecedented circumstances. So in normal circumstances, if somebody says, I can't come back to work, they have 2 choices really. One is come back to work and the other is resign because you can't do the job. We think because of this, the situation parents have right now, that in future court cases, tribunals are going to be looking quite dimly on companies that have been, shall we say, can't think of the word now.
Unfair
Or unreasonable in the way they've treated parents. So I think, with parents, that the questions business owners should be asking are, can you work any hours at all? Maybe could we look at different shifts? Could you work from home? Are there any tasks we could, perhaps they're not normally done as one job, but are there tasks we could bundle up and maybe give to one person to do from home, so that they could do them in hours, when children are asleep or entertaining themselves perhaps. Could parents, if they're co-parenting, could they work between themselves to kind of cover different shifts for their different employers? So, one parent's working days, one parent works evenings, perhaps. But it might be with some parents, there just are no other options. There's no possibility of either being able to find them suitable work, or being able to, for them to be able to come in and work the hours that the employer wants. So on those circumstances, if the employer can continue to furlough, that would be the best option. If the employer can't continue to furlough because there really is work available and there's nothing they can do other than bring the person back in, there's the option of offering unpaid leave to parents as well. But I think asking parents to resign or putting them in a position where they have to resign, that is going to be looked on very dimly by the courts in the future. Because we are still, as an economy, it does still tend to be women that tend to have the majority of childcare responsibilities. And in law, if you sort of have a provision that affects one gender more unfavourably than another, that is known as indirect discrimination, and that's unfair. So employers need to tread very carefully, I think, be as understanding as they possibly can be, but equally parents need to try and be as flexible as they possibly can be as well, to try and help their employer out as much as they can.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. In the optician world, the split is sort of even. There's a lot of women in the practice, in every role really, whether they're assistants, managers, opticians, etc., owners. So we've got a good mix really, and I think childcare plays a big part. And I say this women, but generally I'm a dad, and I have kids, and I have the same issue. Childcare is a big issue for me. So I like to be classed in the mums group almost really, because without childcare I'm stuck and I wouldn't be able to work. So I work my work or my business around the kids nowadays. So if the next few months for us anyway as opticians are going to be really busy, because there can be a backlog of eyes needs testing. There's a lot of people overdue. So we're going to suddenly go from nobody having their eyes tested to lots of people waiting, queuing. So we're going to have all these people needing an eye test, and you've got the staff there, they're coming back, but they've also want to take holidays. Are they allowed to take their holidays in this busy period? What happens? Because, are you allowed to take your holidays or not?
Well, you do need to see what it says in your employment contract about taking holidays. So there'll normally be a clause in there. But the general rule in the UK is that it's at the business owner's discretion when holidays are taken. So people can request holidays, but they always have to be authorised by their manager or by the business owner. So what the government has done, obviously recognising that these are very difficult times, they have relaxed a part of the working time regulations. So employees can carry forward 20 days, up to 20 days of holiday into the next 2 leave years when they return. Now that provision was put in really for people who had to work through, so key workers who've worked all the way through the last 3 or 4 months and haven't been able to take their holiday, but it could be used for people who've been on furlough. The other option business owners might want to consider is actually requesting or requiring people to take their holidays while they are furloughed. And that might sound a bit odd, because you might think, well, I'd like to be on a beach really when I take my holiday. But there is nothing to stop a business owner saying to their employee, I need you to take 5 days holiday while you're furloughed. By law, you have to give double the amount of notice compared to the amount of leave you want them to take. So if you want them to take 5 days leave, you must give 10 working days leave, 10 working days notice to take that leave. And as an employer, whatever you're claiming back from the government in terms of your furlough, you would have to top up the individual's pay to 100% of their normal pay. So if you're claiming your 80% back from the government, you might have to pay 20% per day to the individual to top their pay up to 100%, but to enable them to take the holidays. And a lot of businesses are doing that at the moment. They are asking employees or telling employees they have to use up some of their holiday during this furlough period. I think the thing to be mindful of as a business owner is about being reasonable on this. So asking someone to take their entire year's leave in the furlough period isn't going to be particularly reasonable, but asking somebody to take 5-7 days perhaps that they've accrued over the last 3 months is probably reasonable.
I think we're going to be busy, so I think that seems fair enough to take some of your leave and save some for obviously times like Christmas and various other times throughout the year when you need it. I think thinking back to staff and what they're up to, and some businesses are suffering right now and are struggling. Obviously, they've not had pay, they're not being able to make money, etc., etc. The opticians are a funny bunch because they have been helped by the government in various forms. Now, I won't go into the details of things, but generally, they've had some help from the NHS. So even though they've not been testing patients, generally, if they are open or have been open, they have been able to claim some help towards that and stuff. But some companies are struggling. Okay, so they're struggling because they haven't got the income, etc., etc. And are they allowed to, say, make their staff take a pay cut to cope with the current situation?
So this becomes quite a difficult area because we hear a lot of high-profile companies have got their staff to take a pay cut. So a lot of business owners think this is okay. Actually, pay is part of your contract of employment with the individual that you've employed, and it's a key term in that contract. And you can only change terms in a contract of employment with consent. So that means you would need to sit down with the individuals concerned and get them to agree to have to accept a pay cut. You can't just tell them they've got to have a pay cut, because that isn't consultation, that isn't getting consent, that's you telling them. You actually need to sit down and explain to them. Perhaps you need to explain the business situation to them, what your finances are like, the risks that the business is running, and see if they will agree to a pay cut. You might have success if you could get them to just agree to a temporary pay cut, maybe for 3 months or something. That might be enough to sort of help the business through a difficult time. But you also need to give some thought, if you've got some employees who are furloughed and some employees who are working through, you've got your furloughed employees receiving 80% of their normal pay. If you then ask your employees who are working their normal hours to take a pay cut, they're not actually much better off working than they would have been on furlough. So you do need to sort of think about the motivation and the engagement of people if cutting pay is something that you're forced into considering. And I would say, take it carefully, think really carefully about what other cuts you could make within your business before you get to pay. So, are there things that you could sort of cut down on waste, cut down on other expenditure? But if you do have to consider pay, you must talk to your employees. And I would say you probably need a month or so to really consult with them and get them to understand what your scenario is and to think through whether they could actually afford to work for a lower salary, and then get them to agree that way. Now, I was going to say, it's just not something you should impose on workforces, because that would be unlawful, and you would find yourself, employees would be entitled to bring an employment tribunal claim for unlawful deduction from wages because they've not consented to the deduction that you've made to their pay.
I think there's a lot of fear within our industry from staff. We have different people at different levels. So we've got optical assistants, shop floor staff, managers, etc. Now, is it possible, or is it fair, maybe two different things, that the shop floor staff or the managers or whatever do not have to take a pay cut, but they find that the optician, who's obviously the highest paid in the practice, has the conversation about having a pay cut when no other staff member has had to do the same.
Well, is it fair? Depends where you're sitting, I suppose. If you're one of the lowest paid employees, you might say, well, it's not fair that I should have to take a pay cut when that optician's earning so much more than I am. But equally, is it fair to just pick on one group or one individual who's well paid against a whole workforce? It probably doesn't look very fair to that individual either. I think that's a really hard decision to have to make if you're just going to try and, almost divide and conquer, isn't it? But it's just try and pick one person or one group of people to make a pay cut. The differentials in pay between different roles in organisations is such an emotive issue for staff, as well as being an important recruitment tool for the business. So just thinking about the impression it's making on your staff, I would say think about it very hard before you try and do it. But there is nothing actually unlawful about asking one person to take a pay cut. I think if you looked at the entire organisation and said actually all the people that were asked to take pay cuts were, I don't know, Black African men, and the people who were allowed to keep their pay were other ethnic minorities or other racial groups, then you could easily see that that's likely to be unlawful discrimination. So I think every business is going to have to look at that very, very carefully and think about the big picture as well as their own individual business.
What would you say to business owners then who are coming back into practice, dealing with all this stuff going on? Where could they get some help, or what help would you advise them? Because they're really, sometimes these business owners, they are individual stores, practices. They're dealing with HR, they're dealing with everything like that. Is there any help that they can get, or where could they look for support? Just regarding management and general HR stuff.
Yeah, so there's free support out there from places like ACAS. So the ACAS have got a website. They've also got a phone line. You can ring and sort of ask them for advice. And there's plenty of other sort of websites out there that you could go and access. The CIPD, actually, the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development, have got some good information. And a lot of the stuff on the government website, the coronavirus advice, is quite good. Some of it's got a bit overcomplicated, so it might be a bit difficult to pick your way through. Your accountant's a good source of advice for the numbers side of things, but you really do need somebody who's got a bit of employment law knowledge to help you through the employment implications of things. So accountants aren't HR specialists, and it is really important that you take advice from an HR consultant. So there's lots of independents out there like me. Obviously, I'm more than willing to help anybody who's listening to this podcast if they've got particular issues or concerns, or just want someone to hold their hand through a process. But please do take advice. It's a lot quicker actually to ring somebody up who knows what they're doing and say, I've got this scenario, what should I do? We know exactly which bits of law to pick a mix from, where it could take you hours to research things on the internet. So come and ask a professional.
Brilliant. I think there's the other aspect of it as well. Obviously, from a management point of view, this is a very tricky situation. You don't want to do the wrong thing when you're trying to do the right thing. So it is difficult. So I think to get some professional advice from someone like yourself would be helpful. But also from the other side of things, as an employee, where could we get help from? Because obviously you're worried about your job, you're worried about everything really. Where could they get advice from?
Employees can also contact ACAS and they will give them advice. If you're a member of a trade union, then go and ask your trade union rep or branch steward for some advice and support. Otherwise, if you've got a claim against your employer, you do need to pick quite carefully what you do about that, because most HR professionals can't actually deal with things from an employee's side. So you do need to ask your HR consultant whether they're registered with the claims, with the Financial Conduct Authority to actually handle claims from employees. But there are some HR professionals out there who can be a support for employees and help them up to if they've got a claim against their employer, and to help them with things like disciplinary processes or grievance processes and things like that. But do check that they're registered with the FCA before you part with any money.
There's a lot of stuff out there going on. I think, like you said, it's very emotional at the moment. Whether you want to come back to work, whether you want to stay at home, whether your pay is being frozen or reduced, or in some of our industry, the contractors are being asked to half their pay, work longer hours, which is a crazy thing. It's like asking a doctor saying, well, can you work longer hours, but we're only going to pay you half? Is that okay? It just seems like a crazy thing. So any other industry, it sounds crazy, but apparently it's okay in our industry. I don't think it is okay. I think those are crazy notions from some people. I think fair pay is fair pay, and fair hours. I totally understand that this is a unique situation, and I think there needs to be some sort of negotiation between business and the individual employees. And I think the difficulty is that if a company is taking advantage of the individual, that's a different matter. If you're working the same amount and asking to work for half the pay, this is when some of the true colours come out of some companies, and it's an awkward one, because the only thing that the person can say is, no, I don't want to work for you, and you have to vote with your feet. Is that about right? Is there anything else that they can do?
That sounds pretty much, really, that is what they can do. I mean, some people, if you've got the stomach for it and you want to stay and fight, you can lodge a tribunal claim and see if that gets anywhere. But the reality is, that tribunals haven't been hearing many cases, if any at all, at the moment. So there's going to be a huge backlog by the time they get back to actually hearing cases. It could be two years or more before your case gets heard. So I think for a lot of employees, unfortunately, they will just kind of vote with their feet. It's such a difficult situation. And I always say to business owners, everybody is stressed right now. Everybody, and as you've clearly explained, everybody's feeling it. And people who are stressed don't tend to make good decisions, and they don't tend to behave as rationally as they do without the stress being around. So we're all kind of on edge, and I think sometimes businesses are making quick decisions that they haven't necessarily thought through because they have to respond quickly to something. They're not always thinking through the consequences for their staff, and equally staff are scared, and they're feeling, they're not always reacting the way that they would normally react under other circumstances. I think this is going to take a while to settle. The fact that there aren't going to be that many jobs available, I suspect, over the next few months is also going to be a factor that probably sways in the employer's favour, that more employees will accept some of the things that businesses are doing, not because they're right, but because employees need a job. So to some extent, we've got to be realistic through that. Doesn't mean I think it's the right thing to do. I don't think it's a sustainable long-term strategy for a business to upset its employees. But we'll see. I think the good employers at the end of all this will come through as, and be a success. I really hope so anyway.
It's one of those things. It's like a lot of medical stuff. People have not really been not well or well all this time. They just have held off with all their situations. So, you've seen a lower footfall to the GPs. Those people with sniffles and things like that, normally that turn up the GP every other day, are still there. They just haven't turned up because they found it too risky. Those people with toothaches and things like that, they are still there. They've just had to wait until they get to a point where it's a situation where they need to come in. And with eyes, it's exactly the same. The average person who just have a routine eye test is fine, but there are thousands and thousands of people still needing their eyes checking because they have eye conditions, ongoing conditions such as diabetes or glaucoma or other eye conditions. In terms of the lack of work or the lack of demand in a healthcare setting, I don't think that's an issue in our business. What is the issue is the social distancing and how we get around not get around it, because we're not really trying to get around it. It's about safety, really. So how many people can we have in the store, in the practice? That's what's going to limit our footfall. So if the rules change, we go from 2 meters to 1 meter, it may help things a little bit. If we wear masks, which we are all advised to do now, whether you're a patient or a staff member in an enclosed space where we're going to be wearing masks. So I think the footfall is going to be the big driver with regards to the number of people we can see. Because everybody's ready to be able to see as many people as possible, because it's such a backlog and they all need help. They need new glasses, they need eye conditions checking. But I think it's just doing it safely. So just going to finish off. Thank you very much for coming on to the podcast and giving us some amazing advice, because I think from a practice owner to an employee to a contractor, we've all needed that sort of guidance and advice, and really appreciate that. Where can we find out a bit more about yourself, and if we need to contact you? Do you have, it's all in the background there by the looks of things, but is there anywhere else we can reach you?
So you can email me if you'd like to. That's marion@marionparrish.com. And my website address, if you're watching, you can see it. And if you're not, if you're listening, it's www.marionparrish.com.
Okay. That's great. We'll put it in the show notes anyway, so in the podcast notes. So it'll all be there for you guys to be able to just click and go straight to your website or to your LinkedIn profile, whatever you prefer, which is great. So once again, thank you ever so much for coming onto the podcast and sharing your expert advice.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.